Picture yourself wandering through a garden center, eyes wide with excitement, or scrolling through a seed catalog late at night. Everywhere you look, something catches your attention. Exotic foliage, breathtaking blooms, promises of lush growth seemingly overnight. It feels like magic. But beneath that beauty hides a truth most gardeners only discover the hard way. Not every plant belongs in your space. Some will silently wage war on everything around them. Some carry chemicals that poison the ground beneath your feet. Some can land you in a hospital. And a few will dismantle your garden from the roots up, long before you ever notice. That is precisely why what you are about to hear matters so deeply. These are plants that even the most experienced gardeners wish they had never touched. Some are relentless invaders. Others are hidden toxins, and several manage to be both at once. Stay with me all the way through because the final plants on this list are the ones that surprise even the most seasoned growers. Bamboo is often the first mistake people make, and it is easy to understand why. Standing tall, with graceful canes swaying in the breeze, it looks like a living sculpture. Homeowners dream of lush, natural screens blocking out neighbors, windbreaks that feel like a bamboo forest, a hint of tropical paradise right outside the back door. And honestly, in the early days, bamboo delivers on that promise beautifully. But then comes the reckoning. Bamboo travels underground through structures called rhizomes, and those underground runners have absolutely no regard for fences, property boundaries, or even poured concrete. Within a handful of years, that charming corner planting transforms into a spreading green empire, pushing through lawns, flower beds, and straight into neighboring properties. Homeowners across the world have shared costly horror stories of spending years and staggering sums of money attempting to excavate bamboo after the fact, pouring barrier walls, or calling in professional removal crews. The plant's persistence is almost supernatural. Cut it to the ground, and it surges back from below. Burn it, and fresh growth emerges defiantly. A single sliver of root left in the soil is enough to rebuild an entire stand from scratch. That is why seasoned gardeners frequently say bamboo is more stubborn than the worst weed imaginable. Clumping varieties do exist and behave far more reasonably, but the running types will consume everything. If the aesthetic calls to you, confine bamboo strictly to large containers where escape is impossible. In open ground, it is a commitment you will regret for the rest of your gardening life. Mint earns its place on this list through pure deception. It smells wonderful, it flavors your evening tea, and sitting in its little nursery pot, it looks completely innocent. But the moment mint enters your garden soil, its true character reveals itself. Mint does not share. Like bamboo, it dispatches underground runners in every direction. And before you have had a chance to enjoy a single harvest, mint is erupting 3 feet away, then 5, then filling every crack in your garden path and muscling out everything around it. Thyme, oregano, sage, and every other herb you carefully cultivated gets strangled beneath a tide of fragrant green. Your herb garden slowly becomes a mojito factory and nothing else. Every gardener who has made this mistake eventually learns the rule that experienced growers have always known. Mint belongs in a container, full stop. Keep it potted and you get all the flavor and fragrance you could want without the takeover. Some gardeners go further and sink the pot into the ground so it looks naturally planted while staying permanently contained. But letting mint loose in open soil is a beginner's error, with consequences that linger for years. English ivy has charmed countless gardeners with its timeless visual appeal. Draped across a stone wall or old fence, it evokes the atmosphere of a secret garden from another century, romantic and utterly elegant. What that first impression hides, however, is a campaign of quiet destruction. Ivy grows fast and climbs without mercy, pressing its tiny rootlets into brick, timber, and siding, slowly prying surfaces apart and causing damage that often runs into thousands of dollars before anyone connects it back to the plant. On trees, ivy is a slow executioner, It coils around the trunk, ascends into the canopy, and cuts off sunlight from the leaves until the tree gradually weakens and dies, all while the ivy continues its advance completely unbothered. On the ground, it lays down a suffocating carpet that eliminates grass, flowers, and native plants, replacing biological diversity with a single impenetrable monoculture that is extraordinarily difficult to reverse. Many regions now classify English ivy as an invasive species, and homeowners associations frequently prohibit it because of the structural damage it reliably causes. The photographs look lovely. The lived reality is something else entirely. If climbing plants are what you are after, safer and better behaved options exist. English ivy is one plant you will wish you had left on the shelf. Wisteria in full bloom is genuinely one of the most spectacular sights a garden can offer. Long cascading clusters of violet flowers hanging from a pergola or arbor look as though they belong in a painting. That visual splendor is real, and it is also exactly how wisteria earns its way into gardens where it then proceeds to cause chaos. The vines develop extraordinary strength over time, coiling tightly around wooden posts, fencing, and living trees, squeezing with enough force to strangle and kill whatever they embrace. A mature wisteria carries tremendous weight, enough to collapse an undersized pergola or pull a fence apart at the joints if the structure was not built to handle it. Underground, the roots push outward aggressively, making full removal of an established plant close to impossible. Gardeners who choose to keep wisteria spend considerable hours every single year pruning and managing its growth. Neglect it for one season and it runs completely wild. For anyone seeking a relaxed, low-effort garden, wisteria is a disaster in beautiful disguise. If those purple flowers are what you crave, research less aggressive alternatives or keep wisteria in a strictly controlled, containerized environment. Planting it freely is a decision that tends to haunt people. Black walnut trees carry a secret weapon that most gardeners never suspect until it is too late. The tree looks magnificent, throws generous shade, and produces edible nuts, which makes it seem like a genuinely rewarding addition to any property. But buried within its biology is a chemical called juglone, released continuously through roots, fallen leaves, and husks. Juglone is toxic to a remarkably wide range of garden plants, including tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, azaleas, and hydrangeas, among many others. Gardeners frequently puzzle over vegetable beds that keep failing, cycling through explanations and remedies without ever suspecting that the soil itself has been chemically compromised by a nearby tree. The situation becomes even more complicated after removal. Cut the tree down, and the roots continue releasing juglone for years while they slowly decompose, leaving affected zones of your yard essentially barren season after season. If you inherit land that already has a black walnut on it, your best path forward is planting juglone-tolerant species such as corn or beans in the vicinity and relocating your sensitive crops to raised beds positioned well away from the root zone. But deliberately planting a black walnut, that is a choice that quietly narrows your gardening possibilities for decades to come. Poison ivy is familiar enough that most people can recite the warning. Leaves of 3, let it be. And yet it manages to colonize countless properties before homeowners even realize it has arrived. Part of the problem is how unremarkable it looks, blending casually into surrounding vegetation with nothing to signal danger. But its oil, known as urushiol, is extraordinarily potent. Contact with leaves, stems, or roots produces painful rashes, blistering, and relentless itching that can persist for weeks. The oil is also adhesive in a particularly troublesome way. It clings to garden gloves, clothing, tools, and the fur of pets, creating pathways for exposure long after the initial contact. Most alarmingly, if poison ivy is accidentally set on fire, the resulting smoke carries urushiol directly into the lungs, producing reactions that can become life-threatening. That risk alone makes this plant one that has no business anywhere near a garden. If it appears on your property, approach removal with full protective gear and serious caution. Many people opt to call professionals rather than take any chances. This is not a nuisance. It is a genuine hazard. Morning glories have an undeniable charm that draws in newer gardeners almost magnetically. Their trumpet-shaped blooms unfurl at sunrise in rich shades of violet, cobalt, rose, and white, and the vines race up fences, trellises, and walls with impressive speed, turning bland vertical surfaces into vibrant tapestries. They seem like an easy win: fast growth, prolific flowering, minimal demands. But the longer picture is far more complicated, and growers who have dealt with morning glories over several seasons know the frustration that eventually follows. The core issue is their seeding behavior, which borders on relentless. One plant produces hundreds of seeds, and those seeds do not simply disappear over winter. They remain viable in the soil for years, sometimes stretching toward a full decade. Remove the parent plant entirely, and seedlings will keep emerging year after year as though nothing happened. The vines themselves compound the problem by winding tightly around anything they can reach, sometimes choking shrubs, young trees, and vegetable crops as they go. In a kitchen garden, morning glories can engulf tomatoes, beans, and corn, reducing light and airflow in ways that weaken yields and invite disease. In warmer climates, they cross out of gardens altogether, invading natural spaces and overwhelming native vegetation under dense mats of tangled growth that resist all efforts at eradication. Castor bean occupies a strange and dangerous position in the gardening world. It is visually extraordinary. Growing as tall as 10 feet in a single season, its enormous star-shaped leaves can span more than a foot across and display in deep greens, warm bronzes, or dramatic burgundy, depending on the variety, giving any landscape an immediate tropical intensity. It is the sort of plant that stops people mid-stride and makes them ask what it is. That striking presence is precisely what tempts people to grow it. But castor bean carries one of the most lethal natural substances known to exist. Hidden within those ornamental seeds is a protein called ricin, and its toxicity is not a matter of degree. A small handful of seeds holds enough ricin to be fatal to a human being, and even fewer are needed to kill a pet or small animal. Ricin operates by blocking cells from producing proteins, setting off a cascade of organ failure. There is no antidote. Even modest ingestion causes severe nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and seizures, with death as the worst-case outcome. For any household with children, dogs, or cats, this plant represents a risk that simply cannot be justified. The history surrounding castor bean extends well beyond gardens. Ricin has been extracted and weaponized, most infamously in political assassinations during the Cold War, a legacy that underscores just how seriously this plant should be taken. It is worth noting that castor oil, derived from the seeds through a highly controlled industrial process that neutralizes the ricin, has legitimate uses in medicine, cosmetics, and manufacturing. But that process is not something any home grower should approach. The seeds themselves remain among the most dangerous objects you could introduce to a domestic outdoor space. Giant hogweed commands attention the moment it enters your field of vision, reaching heights of 12 to 14 feet, crowned with umbrella-shaped flower clusters measuring over 2 feet across and leaves that spread nearly 5 feet wide. It looks like a plant pulled from deep prehistory. Its sheer scale gives it an almost theatrical presence in any landscape, and gardeners who encounter it without knowing what it is often mistake it for an impressive ornamental specimen worth featuring. That misconception can have serious consequences. Giant hogweed's danger is not in its growth habit alone, but in its sap, which contains compounds called furanocoumarins. When that sap contacts skin and is then exposed to sunlight, it triggers phytophotodermatitis, a reaction that produces severe chemical burns, blistering, and swelling. The scarring and dark pigmentation that follow can persist for months or even years. Contact near the eyes carries the risk of temporary or permanent blindness. The insidious quality of the sap is that its effects are not immediate. Brushing against the plant on a bright afternoon may feel like nothing at all, until the burns appear hours later, by which time the damage is already done. Gardeners who attempt to cut it back without full protective clothing, heavy gloves, long sleeves, eye protection, and in some cases face shields, frequently end up seeking medical attention. Even then, the plant fights back through deep taproots that regenerate from fragments, and cutting only encourages lateral spread. Local authorities in many areas issue fines to property owners who allow giant hogweed to establish, and in numerous regions, it is not merely inadvisable to grow it, it is against the law. Tree of Heaven arrives with a name that promises serenity and delivers the opposite. It grows at an almost alarming pace, throws up root suckers across wide areas, and generates thousands of seeds each year, ensuring its spread is rapid and far-reaching. Its root system is powerful enough to undermine sidewalks, compromise septic systems, and fracture building foundations. Like black walnut, it releases allelopathic chemicals into the surrounding soil that suppress competing plants, gradually creating bare, lifeless patches where nothing else will grow. And when you attempt to remove it by cutting it down, the stump responds by sending up dense clusters of new shoots, producing a thicket that is harder to manage than the original tree. Homeowners who allow this plant to become established typically spend years locked in an unending struggle to reclaim their property. Despite its celestial name, Tree of Heaven is one of the most relentlessly troublesome plants you can allow onto your land. So there you have it. 10 plants that experienced growers universally wish they had never introduced to their gardens. Some seduce with beauty, some win you over with scent. Others seem so modest in their little nursery containers that it never crosses your mind to be cautious. But each one carries consequences that can drain your time, empty your wallet, and in some cases, genuinely threaten your health. Gardening is meant to be a source of joy, not an ongoing fight against the choices of your past self. The plants you select shape the entire experience, and choosing wisely from the start spares you an enormous amount of grief later on. If what you heard today was useful, share it with the growers in your life, and follow Primal Life for more honest, practical guidance to help you build the garden you have always envisioned. And drop a comment letting us know whether any of these plants have ever caused you trouble. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear before making the same mistake.